What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode review for Bleach: The Thousand Year Blood War. This is episode 10, and with me, as always, I have Blue Spade.
hmm Yeah, I mean, I can definitely say I enjoyed the fight between Unohana and Zaraki, even though I kind of feared what was going to happen with Unohana by the end of that fight. Um,
I
so
think even if you're an
yeah,
anime only, you could probably assume that Kenpachi or that Zaraki was going to survive, was going to live through that fight. If one of them was going to die, it was most likely going to be Unohana.
yeah. I mean, it's kind of unfortunate. I mean, this is the first time we actually get to see, her full strength.
Yeah.
Since the start of the series. I mean, overall, the fight itself, it was well animated, especially when it gets to the point where Unohana finally reveals her Bankai. What was it called? Minazuki?
Yeah. A lot of people, too, were comparing it, like the way the anime did it, at least, because I was looking at the comparison with the manga, and they don't really have this, like how in the anime does it, where the whole area is like covered in blood. That's not exactly how it's portrayed in the manga. Like, there's not any of this, any of the blood surrounding them or anything like that. So I think that was a really interesting choice. And it kind of, like, people are pointing out that it's kind of reminiscent of the domain expansion abilities from Jujutsu Kaisen. It did kind of remind me of that, which, for those who don't know, like, the domain expansion in Jujutsu Kaisen is basically like when the environment around somebody changes, and it's part of like an ability, like the person's ability to basically like change the environment around them, more or less. And it's kind of what happens here. So I thought that was an interesting way to show it.
Yeah, and just the fact that they make Unohana like significantly terrifying in this
Yeah.
version of her. They get to the point where you can see
Like,
like parts of their skulls and like
oh yeah, that.
Unohana just fight only of the skull head, and when she's fighting, which is, I pointed this. I kind of wrote on Twitter that I find Unohana's Bankai significantly more terrifying than Byakuya's Bankai.
Yeah, and I mean it's interesting too because a lot of people probably never would have expected Unohana to be this kind of a character, but there were kind of little hints in the original anime that there was something up with Unohana, but they never really went much into it. So it's kind of interesting to see here that she's just this, to learn that she was just this ruthless killer before she was became who she was, which was pretty much I think she was one of the captains of, or the head cap, or one of the captains, of Squad 4, which is mostly just a squad that heals, or that deals with like healing people for the most part.
Yeah,
Um,
but when the episode starts, we see that back during a flashback, I think they said hundreds of years ago, that Unohana spent most of her job just going around slaughtering bandits, looking for for worthy opponent to fight against, until she ends up meeting a young child, which is of course a younger Kenpachi Zaraki. And back then, Kenpachi back then still had that that old withered, almost nearly like chip broken sword that he always carries around.
yeah. Well, and we also discover that, because Kenpachi, Zaraki had fought Unohana all those years ago, and that he had actually beaten her. And during their fight, Unohana basically says that she's disappointed because Kenpachi, the old Kenpachi would have easily beaten her without her having to like resort to using tricks or something like that.
Yeah.
And basically implying that Kenpachi had become weaker. And we do see that that it's actually explained in the episode that this whole time that Kenpachi had actually been somewhat holding himself back, and not like really using his full power. Like every fight we've seen him, we've seen Kenpachi, and he'd actually been holding himself back from what he's truly capable of.
Yeah, and she points out all of the different battles that Kenpachi's been fighting. Well, particularly why Ichigo was barely able to beat Kenpachi back in the earlier arcs, and then Kenpachi's fight against the Iran cars and in the Iran car arc.
I think it was
However,
Noritora or
yeah,
something like.
yeah, you know, yeah, I can't probably pronounce it,
Yeah,
but yeah, it was that guy. I mean, he was able to beat him, but he had to like kind of. I remembered he kind of had to go beyond his abilities, but it wasn't his full potential at the time.
mhm.
Um, so eventually, the fight gets to the point. Well, over the course of the fight, Unohana says that she repeatedly kills Kenpachi numerous times and then heals him at the same time. And
Yeah, I was
Kenpachi,
confused about that in the last episode because it seemed like I wasn't sure if it was a hallucination or if that had actually happened. And the anime doesn't really like it. At least in the last episode, it didn't really confirm anything. But in this episode, yeah, it's revealed that Unohana had been killing him and just like reviving him because as every time he's like near the point of death, and that Kenpachi had been like blacking out, and every time that happened.
yeah, yeah. Eventually, the fight ends once Zaraki ends up impaling her with his sword, and this, of course, pleases Unohana, saying that she did what she could to help Zaraki grow, and of course, unfortunately, like Zaraki ends up grieving for Unohana, saying that that someone like her doesn't deserve to die over something like this, and
Hmm.
of course, Unohana eventually passes on before Zaraki ends up speaking with his Zanpakuto. Well, of course, we don't really find out the actual name of his Zanpakuto during this conversation before the that scene cuts out.
Yeah, and I mean this is kind of a big deal because Kenpachi's never been able to hear his Zanpakuto until now.
Mhm.
Um, Also, I want to point out too, like it seems like there was like I don't know if it's just me, but it seems like there was a lot of just with like the movements of Unohana in this episode. It really reminded me of like Melania from Elden Ring, especially with like one of the moves she does. Where like she just has like her swords just wildly like swinging around. It kind of reminded me of like I think it was like Swallow Dance or something. One of the moves that Melania does. It seemed really similar to that. So I have to wonder if like the animators might have been taking some influence from like that or some other FromSoft stuff when they just kind of animated this episode because it definitely reminded me a lot of that. And some people on Twitter are even pointing that out. And also some people were saying like some of the moves she was doing reminded them also of the Rivers of Blood move that you can do in Elden Ring if you have if you have more Dex abilities and you can use that use like the use that katana that can do that.
Mhm.
It kind of seemed reminiscent of that.
Yeah, it definitely looks similar after looking at a comparison video of the Elden Ring
Yeah.
gameplay and Unohana's movements. I guess you could say the creators definitely had some influence. I mean, they needed to animate it in a way that surpasses the manga panels. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
you can't tell like how a person fights in the manga panels until you
Yeah,
actually
I mean, you
watch
could
the
get a
anime.
general idea, but yeah, I mean, it's like the animators always kind of have to somewhat bring their own unique flair to it because, yeah, I mean, like you said, no, you can't really translate that like 100% into motion. Sometimes you kind of have to come up with different things. But I mean, and of course, there were some original scenes in this fight too that weren't in the manga anyway.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah, I have to wonder like how the episode was structured because I read on
Well,
Twitter
according
that
to a manga comparison video, they adapted some chapters in this episode that they had skipped over in previous episodes. Um, so they kind of made it. I guess they kind of do do that to make the episode or to make it maybe make the story flow better or something like that. Um, it seems like that's the reason why it was done that way. Um, but yeah, I think this episode adapts like four and a half chapters from the manga.
Mhm. Yeah, that's what I also heard because I would have imagined like if some uh animators had their way, they would have at least they would have ended up switching between different scenes between Ichigo and Renji and this fight as well. But I'm kind of glad that they focused one half of the episode on this fight, and then of course
It would be kind
moving
of
on to
jarring if they did that too, because I mean, the beginning of this episode is really dark and serious, and then we cut to Ichigo and Renji, where it's more like comedic.
yeah.
So I feel like it would just be really weird if they were cutting between that and
Mhm.
the fight.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Ichigo and the others, so we go back with Ichigo, Renji, and Kon arriving at what was it, Captain Numiya's place at this place called the Huden,
Yeah.
where initially they go into like I guess, well, I don't know what you call it. They meet like
I mean,
this room full of girls, but
it's
we find
similar to like, I guess, a hostess club. Um,
yeah.
yeah, and, we find out all the girls are actually Zanpakuto.
Zanpakuto spirits. I mean, it's kind of funny, like when they did a filler arc of you know, yeah, the Zanpakuto rebellion, in which where they see the physical manifestations of the Zanpakutos. But of course, it's funny that they don't even they make no mention of this. Of course, the none of that is really canon with with much of that story being so inconsistent with the storyline right now. Yeah, so eventually, Nemiya teaches them about how Soul Reapers receive their Zanpakuto. Basically, they get it from this thing called the Asuichi, and it eventually becomes their personalized Zanpakuto. The more the wielder imprints their spiritual pressure into it. So Nemiya tosses both Ichigo and Renji down like this pit filled with countless Asuichi, which, well, I guess they're all like just living mannequins or of Zanpakuto or something like that. And I find the way they did this in a weird way, in which instead of continuing on with the episode, it cuts the credits. Then we get, it skips over to into a post-credit scene, continuing this 3 days later.
Yeah, I did think that was kind of weird too. I mean, I feel like that didn't need to be an after credits scene. But yeah, it's a fairly lengthy one because it's like a few minutes. But yeah, I didn't really mind it too much. But yeah, we kind of it's kind of interesting because, of course, what was it now? Nino Maya? He basically says, Ichigo had failed in this like test because they were down there for like 3 days fighting the Yasuichi, pretty much barehanded. And he said that, Renji has passed the test and he's actually a Soul Reaper, whereas Ichigo has failed the test. So he's not a Soul Reaper and he no longer belongs in the Soul Society.
Yeah, and of course, Nemaya teleports him back into the human world right in front of the Kurosaki clinic, citing that he needs to go back to his roots since he never really he never really had like the traditional Soul Reaper training because of how he got his Soul Reaper abilities in the first place.
Yeah, so he basically needs to learn, like, I guess, his origins or like where he came from to better understand himself. And it's funny, somebody pointed this out too. Like, this is like the second time in the series that Ichigo is kind of like lost all of his powers again. He needs to, I guess this time he needs to regain them by learning like who he really is, and most likely from his father. So yeah, just not to spoil too much, but we're about to go into the flashback arc I've kind of been mentioning, which is Everything But the Rain, and we see that title pop up at the end of the episode. So next week, I think, we're probably going to start to go into that. It seems like the first core is going to end with the Everything But the Rain arc.
Yeah, I think we only have technically 3 episodes left.
Yeah.
But we also got
and then
news
the last
that
two are going to be
yeah, the last 2 episodes are going to be 1 episode combined together. So it's going to be interesting. So Of course, we still need to get an announcement when they're gonna announce the second core to this. Assuming
Didn't they say there was going to be some announcements later? I forget when they said there was going to be an announcement sometime soon regarding Bleach. So it'll probably be then when they're going to announce that.
Yeah, I think it's possible, but I think we would need to wait until they air the finale for the first core. What was it, by December 26th? They said, or was it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think we would need to wait around that time, but yeah, I did like this episode. I like the first half of the episode in which they concluded the Unohana and Zaraki fight. I mean, I'm kind of still a little bit upset that they ended up killing off Unohana this soon after she showed off her, full potential in this episode. I mean, it's unfortunate that we never really got to see her fight against the Quincy's, especially even after that, after all the Soul Reapers have endured in this arc.
Yeah, but I think it does make sense for her character considering she was the Kenpachi for so long before Zaraki became Kenpachi.
Mm-hmm.
And Zaraki is, he is the new Kenpachi, and it's pretty much like she's got to, she has to like pretty much just pass it. Well, I mean, she kind of, I guess, technically had passed the Kenpachi title over, but now she just kind of has to, I guess, in a way, like finish his, finish his training. So I get it kind of makes sense what ends up happening with her, but it's just a shame because this is really the first time we see, or that we, well, really with the 1,000-Year Blood War arc is the first time that we see what Unohana used to be. So I mean, we only get like a little bit of that before, before she dies. So I kind of wish we could have seen a little bit more of that side of her before she ended up getting killed, or just before she ended up dying. But yeah, I don't really mind it too much. I pretty much expected it to happen, of course. But yeah, I thought this was a really good episode. Definitely one of the best episodes. It's hard to say, like, because I mean, all of these episodes I feel like have been consistently pretty good. It's hard to say which, I can't really say there's been any bad episodes out of this, out of the 1,000-Year Blood War.
Yeah,
I think they've done a really good job with it so far.
Yeah, I still find the whole end credit scene method a little questionable. I don't think that really needed to be an end credit scene, though. It's just the way that I really feel like. I feel like
what they could have done instead was just have like that most of that scene play out before the credits, and then just have the last scene be Ichigo in front of the Kurosaki clinic as the post-credit scene.
Yeah,
and it would only because it's only like a 5-second scene or whatever.
Yeah. So. What I really thought, what would have happened to this episode was for them to have the Ichigo and Renji stuff happen first, and then cut out when they were put into that pit, and then show off the Zaraki and Unohana fight, and then cut back to 3 days later after that fight happened soon after. But I don't know. It was kind of weird that they decided to just do the 3-day time skip after the credits. So it's I don't know. It just kind of felt a little bit weird for them to do that. And plus, I don't know if many people would even notice that happening if they were to stick around after the credits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I don't really have too much else to say about the episode. I don't know if you have anything else to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, overall, it was a good episode. I'm definitely looking forward to next week's episode. Hopefully, we'll get to learn more about Ichigo's past, or in better terms, I guess, the past of his family of sorts.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting because it's, of course, going to go over his father and his mother's relationship, which we really didn't see haven't seen any of it throughout the entire series until this point. We've only heard, just Ishin kind of briefly talk about her, but we've never really seen much of Masaki Kurosaki and like what how she was. Just pretty much just the brief flashbacks before she died, and Ishin kind of talking about her sometimes.
Yeah, and also the revelation with Ichigo finding out that his mother has something to do with the Quincy's.
Yeah. Yeah, so that like that it'll just be interesting to see like I'm assuming like a younger version of her and Ishin and how they met. So yeah, but looking forward to that. But yeah, that being said, guys, until next time, we will see you all later.